Okay guys, as we continue in the finance unit, we're going to start the personal loan and simple interest section. In this section, you're going to learn how to calculate ordinary interest, and you're going to learn about the United States rule and the banker's rule. Let's start with some terminology. The amount of credit extended to the principal of the loan and the interest rate that you may obtain depend on the assurance that you can give the lender that you will be able to repay the loan. Okay, so the principal of the loan is how much that you attempt to borrow. Security, often called collateral, is anything of value that you give the borrower that they can sell or keep if you do not pay the loan. Okay, so sometimes if you do one of those payday loans, they'll make you list your car as collateral. So if you don't repay the payday loan, they will come and take and sell your car. A personal note is just a document or an agreement that lists all the terms and conditions of the loan. Banks will sometimes grant loan without collateral, but often if they do not collect collateral and you don't have a whole heck of a lot of credit, they're going to ask you to use a cosigner, which is just somebody who can guarantee that you will pay the loan back, and if you do not pay the loan back, then the cosigner will take over the loan in your name. Interest is the money that the bank is going to make, or the lender of the money. And in this section, we're going to focus on simple interest. There's all kinds of different ways that you can charge interest, but simple interest is the most basic, and it's going to be based on the amount of the loan and the length of the loan in years. The simple interest formula is I equals PRT. I stands for the interest that you will pay on the loan. P is the principal, or the amount of the loan that you've borrowed. R is your interest rate, and the interest rate must be a decimal. So be careful, because usually they'll tell you your interest rate is 5%. Okay, you need to convert that to 0.05 in order to calculate the simple interest. And T is going to be the time. Now you need to pay attention to how they've labeled it. Sometimes they'll tell you that it's time in years, time in days, time in month, and depending on how they've labeled, it is going to change the number that you substitute into the problem. So just pay special attention to labels in this section. The most common type of simple interest is called ordinary interest. When you compute ordinary interest, you're going to assume that every month has 30 days. Even if it's 31 days, even if it's February, even if it's leap year. Don't get into all that. Just assume it has 30 days. You are also going to assume that there's 12 months in a year. That shouldn't be terrible. So if you take 12 times 30, that would make 360 days in a year. I know that in actuality, there's 365 days in a year, but in ordinary interest, they do not calculate it like that. On the due date of a simple interest note, the borrower must repay the principal, which is the amount of the loan, plus all of the interest that has accrued. Okay, so an example. Example 1. Sherry Tornwall needs to borrow $6,200 to replace the air conditioner in her home. From her credit union, Sherry obtains a 30-month loan with an annual simple interest rate of 5.75%. A, calculate the simple interest she is charged on the loan. Okay, so simple interest is going to be your basic I equals PRT formula. Okay, so the P is the amount she borrowed. She borrowed $6,200, so you can put that in the spot of P. R is going to be your interest rate as a decimal. So remember, when you turn a percent into a decimal, you shift it 2 spaces to the left. So 5.75% is 0.0575 as a decimal. And then last, you need the length of the loan. And here's where you need to really be careful on your labels. Notice they are calculating the interest annually. So that means once a year they add the interest on. And she has had the loan for 30 months. So you need to figure out how many years she's had the loan to apply the annual interest. So to do this, you're going to take her 30 months and divide it by the fact that there's 12 months in a year, and that will tell you how many years have gone by. If you want to use the decimal, you can. 30 divided by 12 is 2.5. So then just go to your calculator, type in 6,200 times 0.0575 times 2.5, and you will calculate her interest rate, her interest on this loan. Her interest on this loan is going to be $891.25. So that's just the interest. The second part of this question says, determine the amount, principal plus interest, that Sherry must pay to the credit union at the end of 30 months. So she has to pay the original $6,200 that she borrowed, plus she has to pay her interest that we just calculated at $891.25. So added together, she is going to owe the credit union $7,091.25. Something else you'll run into often is what's called a discount note. This is another type of loan. The discount note, the interest is paid at the time that you receive the loan, and the interest charged in advance is called the bank discount. So the minute you get the loan, you pay the interest. That's a discount note. So let's look at an example where we would see this situation. Sigrid Cook took out a $500 loan using a 10% discount note for a period of 3 months. Determine A, the interest she must pay to the bank on the date she receives the loan. B, the net amount of money she receives from the bank. And C, the actual rate of interest for the loan. Okay, so first things we have to do is we have to calculate her interest. So let's shrink this down so we have some room to write. Okay, so to calculate her interest, that is just your I equals PRT. Sorry, my handwriting got a little goofy right there. Okay, so she's doing a $500 loan, so that's your principal. The interest rate for this loan is 10% for the 3 months, so her rate would be 0.10. And she is borrowing this for 3 months. Now, time is usually measured in years. So you have to take the 3 months divided by the number of months in a year. So she's really borrowing the money for a quarter of a year. But you can type it just like that in your calculator. If you're going to type it in your calculator, you would do 500 times 0.10 times 3 divided by 12. And your calculator will give you the correct answer, which is $12.50. So her interest rate is $12.50. Okay, so question A said, determine the interest she must pay to receive, pay to the bank the date she receives the money. She would technically pay them $12.50. Question B, determine the net amount of money she receives from the bank. Okay, well, technically she asked for $500, but they are going to keep $12.50 of it because that is her interest that she is going to have to pay. So you'll have to find the difference there. So she's actually going to walk out of the loan office with only $487.50 in her pocket, okay, because she had to pay the discount loan up front. Chances are, if you need to borrow $500, you probably don't have the $12 to pay them for the loan, so they usually take it out of the money that they lend you. Okay, and then question C. Determine the actual rate of interest for the loan. Okay, so to calculate the actual rate of interest for the loan, you will again use the simple interest formula, which is your I equals PRT. We already calculated the simple interest before, which was the $12.50, so that's not going to change. But the principal changes. She's actually not receiving $500. She's only receiving $487.50. We don't know what rate that is, and we know she's only getting it for 3/12 of a year. Okay, so the question is, what was the rate really? So what I would recommend that you do is on the right-hand side, grab your calculator and take $487.50 and multiply that by 3 and divide it by 12. When you do that, you're going to get the decimal 121.875, and remember that's multiplying R. And then to get R alone, you're going to divide each side of the equation by 121.875. And that will isolate R. Use your calculator to do that division. And when you do the division, you're going to get 0.1026. And again, they want you to turn that into a percent. That's roughly 10%, depending on how you round, 10.3%. So while they said that the loan was 10%, because of the way they took the interest initially from her, she's actually paying a 10.3% interest rate. So it's a little shady practice, so just be careful if you guys ever do one of those discount note loans. Okay, another thing that you're going to run into is called the United States rule. And this can be a little confusing. But for the United States rule, a payment that is less than the full amount owed and made prior to the due date is known as a partial payment. A Supreme Court decision specified the method by which these payments are credited. This procedure is called the United States rule. Okay, so basically that's if you make a partial payment, they're going to implement the United States rule. The United States rule states that if a partial payment is made on the loan, then the interest is computed on the principal from the first day of the loan until the date of the partial payment. The partial payment is used to pay the interest first. The rest of the payment is used to reduce the principal. The balance due on the date of maturity is found by computing interest due since the last partial payment and adding this interest to the unpaid principal. Okay, so when you do this, you're going to have to use what's called the banker's rule. And the banker's rule is used to calculate the simple interest when the United States rule applies. So the banker's rule is going to consider a year to be 360 days, so be careful. Again, don't say that a year is 365. And any fractional part of the year is the exact number of days in the loan. So that can get a little tricky because, some, like January has 31 days, but February only has 28 days. So to do that, they make these little tables, and you're going to find it in your book, table. I would recommend that you print the table out to use as a reference. Okay, so notice like January 1st is day 1, January 2nd is day 2, day 3, and so on. And January has 31 days. So I only have part of the table here on this slide. I have the second part on the next. It's going to go all the way down to January 31st, and then you'll go back up to the February column. So notice December 31st has 365 days. Okay, so if you need to calculate the number of days, then you're going to want to use this table. If it is a leap year, meaning you have February 29th, then you are going to have to add 1 day for February 29th, and then that's going to throw everything off by a day. So just be prepared for that to happen, okay? Okay, so let's look at an example of the United States rule, and I will walk you through how to proceed with this. And you let me know if you have any questions. I think these are probably going to be the most challenging for you, but I'm happy to help, so just let me know. Okay, Kathy Panic is a mathematics teacher, and she plans to attend a national conference. To pay for her airfare on November 1st, 2010, Kathy takes out a 120-day loan for $400 at an interest rate of 12.5%. Kathy uses some birthday gift money to make a partial payment of $150 on January 5th, 2011. She makes a second partial payment of $100 on February 2nd, 2011. A. Determine the due date of the loan. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have to do is use table 11.1. Okay, so if you look, November 1st, 2010 is when she took out the loan. Okay, so if you look at table 11.1, you will see that November 1st is in position 305. Okay, so she's on day 305 of the year. Okay, now her loan term is supposed to be 120 days. Okay, so you can add 120 days to this. which will give you $425. Okay. Now, you have to be careful because the table only goes up to 365. So you're going to have to deduct 365 from this amount, which is going to give you 60. And that is when her due date is going to be. So look at table 11.1, look down the columns until you find the 60, and you will notice that her due date is going to be March 1st, 2011, as long as it's not a leap year, okay? If it was a leap year, which they did not say that it was, then her due date would have been on February 29th, 2011. Okay, question 2. Determine the interest and the amount credited to the principal on January 5th. Okay, so again, you're going to need to use table 11.1. January 5th is the 5th day of the year. And remember that November 1st is the 305th day of the year. So if you calculate, if you take 365 days out of a year and deduct 305, then from November 1st until the end of the year, 60 days have passed. So this gets you to December 31st. Okay, and then you need to do the extra 5 days to get to January 1st. So you have had the loan right now for 65 days. Now you're going to use that with the banker's rule to calculate her interest. So you're going to use the same formula, I equals PRT. Her original loan amount was $400. And the loan rate was 12.5%, so that's 0.125. And she has had the loan for 65 days. And we assume that there's 360 days in a year. I know that's weird. And we're going to use our calculator to multiply all of that out. She will pay $9.03 towards interest. Okay, so she had paid a payment of $150 total. So you're going to have to deduct $9.03 right off the top. $9.03 is going to interest. And then if you take $150 minus the $9.03, the rest will go to principal. So that's going to be $140.97 that goes to principal. Okay. Okay, let's try the next one. Question C. Determine the interest and the amount credited to the principal on February 2nd. Okay, so since there was a second partial payment made, we're going to have to use the banker's rule. Now be careful, our original loan amount was $400, but we made a partial payment. We made a partial payment of $140.97. So we're going to have to deduct that because this is going to be our new principal amount. So our new principal amount when we do our subtraction is $259.03. So this is going to be the new principal. Okay. Now we're going to have to again use table 11.1 to find the number of days from January 5th. Okay, so January 5th is day 5. And she made another payment on February 2nd. So when you look at the table, February 2nd is day 33. So we're going to find the difference between the two. 33 days minus 5 days is 28 days. So this is how long she's had the loan for the second part of the payment. And now we're going to calculate her interest rate again with I equals PRT. So her principal is now down to $259.03. Her interest rate is still 12.5%, and she has had this loan for 28 days out of 360 days in a year. We're going to use our calculator to spit out the answer for us. You can type it in exactly how you see it with the parentheses and the division symbol and everything. And this term, she's going to pay $2.52 interest. Okay, so of her $100 payment this time. $2.52 went to interest. And if you take 100 minus $2.52, then $97.48 went to principal. Okay? And question D, determine the amount that Kathy must pay on the due date. Okay, so remember the last time we calculated her principal, it was $259.03, but we paid $97.48 to that amount. So if we do a subtraction, we'll get her new principal amount. Her new principal amount is $161.55, and that was on day 33 of the year. Okay, well, her loan is due on March 1st, okay, and we said that March 1st was going to be day 60. So if we take day 60 minus day 33, you'll be able to calculate how many days have passed by. So 27 days have passed. So we need to calculate the interest for those 27 days. So we're going to do our I equals PRT. Our principal is now down to $161.55. Our interest rate is still 12.5%, and we are now down to 27 out of 360 days in a year. And we'll spit that into the calculator. The calculator is going to tell us that we owe another $1.51 in interest. So when she goes to pay off the loan, she has to take the $161.55 left in principal plus the $1.51 extra in interest, and she's going to add those together, and she is going to pay the bank $163.06. Now, if you paid attention, notice that the first loan length was 65 days, the second loan length was 28 days, and the third loan length was 27 days. If you add those three together, notice that you got to your 120-day loan. If that doesn't happen, something's wrong. You'll have to go back and check your work. Okay? Let me know if you have questions. This is not an easy section.